How often have you heard someone make a statement and you have thought or said, "What rubbish," or perhaps something more explicit? How can you expect us to believe that? Or you may have heard someone else exclaim that sentiment in similar circumstances. And that is the position of Peter, that Peter is in today's reading. How can he believe what he is being told? Today's reading starts with Jesus teaching his disciples that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. If you were one of the disciples and heard Jesus say this, what would you have thought? Here is the man who's going to save Israel from the oppression and rule of the Romans. The days of Caesar are numbered, and Israel would soon be back with Jesus as its leader, sitting on a golden throne. And the disciples will be the co-rulers of this new empire. Gone will be the days of dusty feet, rumbling stomachs, and mending tattered nets. But that is not what the future holds for the disciples. The message that Jesus is relating to them is vastly different. Jesus attempts to teach the disciples God's plan for the Messiah. Jesus has not come for the religious pharaohs, but for the meek, who willingly respond to him. He has not yet come as the glorious and victorious champion of Israel, but to die for the whole world. Jesus was teaching his disciples about a Messiah who had to suffer. Understandably, the disciples thought Jesus had lost his mind. Peter's protest expressed the sentiments and hopes not only of the disciples, but of the entire nation of Israel. Peter knows his destiny, and that of the other disciples is tied to the destiny of Jesus. No wonder then that Peter is averse to hearing about Jesus' rejection and death. Jesus responds by rebuking Peter and saying, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not on the side of God, but of man." To Jesus, Peter's resistance is a focus on strictly human concerns for self-protection, rather than on divine things. Jesus' lack of concern for self-preservation and self-assertion baffled his closest followers. How could anyone so endowed with divine power possibly lose? It was inconceivable to the disciples that absorbing violence and undergoing death might be precisely Jesus' path to victory. The fact that death is not ultimate for Christians allow them to risk all for righteousness, as the lives of countless martyrs attest. Second, these texts point to an ethic of patience and persistence in the face of difficulty. Jesus teaches his followers to expect a difficult and costly road. Following him can lead to challenges that we might not expect. Where once countries in the Western world were predominantly Christian in their theology and theological views, this is no longer the case. As Christians everywhere in the world, even here in Rotorua, we can at times be ridiculed and even despised for our faith. However, God's purposes stretch over many lifetimes towards a horizon we see by faith, and through which we live, trusting the God who gives life to the dead. And now we are in Lent, as we use this time to prepare for Easter. Lent is often a time when we give up things we enjoy. The ideas of self-denial and cross-bearing have been much abused and too often trivialised. Whittling down self-denial to self-imposed hardships like no chocolate or beer for Lent can amount to a kind of magical thanksgiving. Maybe if I give up these little luxuries, God will be impressed enough not to put me to any real test. The value of Lenten disciplines is that we can help us examine and redirect our lives. Doing some type of community work, such as volunteering for local organisations or helping someone in need, helps us to rethink our priorities and redirect our energies. Taking up the cross means actively embracing the redemptive purposes of God. And maybe that doing so may put you at risk in some way. Risk of censure or criticism, risk of losing friends, or risk of material loss in some way. Challenging the status quo can often give rise to risk. But risk is something to be embraced, not something to run from. This is particularly true for us as Christians, in the way that we live and the example we set for others. It is in such risky living, in Jesus' name, that we gain our souls. So in your lives, are you always going to listen to what Jesus says? Or are there times you might say, what rubbish? Or may there be a time in your life when you'll be at risk because of your belief in Jesus and you decide not to take up the challenge. These are decisions for you and you alone. Amen.